Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Herp Monday number 25 and we have a good one for you today. This thing's a really unique salamander. I think you're going to be quite pleasantly surprised. It's not incredibly rare, but definitely one to be aware of, especially if you live in the eastern US. Today we are going to be talking about the green salamander. Green salamander, or Anides aeneas. I believe that's how it's pronounced. So Anides aeneas. It is part of the family Plethodontidae, which, if you remember, we have talked about plethodontids before, and Plethodontidae is the family of lungless salamanders. So these obviously do not have lungs. They have costal grooves which aid in their breathing. It is found in the eastern US, as I said, which basically, think of the Appalachian Trail. It is found in Pennsylvania, southern Pennsylvania to about northern Alabama and Mississippi. It's got a relatively large range. It's not that uncommon. It is listed as a federal species of concern. I believe mainly, I think these are just pretty hard to find. However, if you do find it, you're going to know what it is, and we'll get into that in a little bit. One of the reasons why you're going to know this salamander, if you find one, is its very hyper-specific habitat. It is found almost exclusively in habitats that have to follow a certain set of guidelines. And those guidelines are crevices of rocks on the side of cliffs or other outcroppings. Little to no sunlight is allowed in the crevice, and there are trees adjacent to the rock outcropping, usually with some older trees, but that is almost exclusively where this salamander is found. Now, that kind of describes a lot of the Appalachian Trail, but it's very important to note, that it's, it has to be in damp but not wet crevices. So it has to have moisture, but it can't just be dripping water, apparently. Apparently, they like it to be just damp, which that's going to aid in their breathing. And also, as you can tell from the picture, going to help them with camouflage. In fact, we'll just go ahead and get into that. This salamander has these green lichen-like blotches against a darker background. And in fact, now we get into the other reason why, if you find this one in the wild, you're going to almost immediately know what it is. Its subgenus are the only salamanders in North America with green markings. This kind of green or greenish yellow lichen-like markings, apparently it is the only group of salamanders in North America that have actual green markings on them. And as you can see in this picture, which has another picture of the green salamander sitting on a bed of lichen. If it is on a bed of lichen, you can imagine that these things can disappear very quickly. So I'd imagine part of that extreme habitat guidelines would have to be some nearby lichens, because this thing could easily disappear. Now, this is not a very large salamander. In fact, it's relatively small. Most of the adults are going to range between 8 and 12 centimeters, which that's 3 to 5 inches, and I believe that's total length, which means from the tip of the snout to the tip of the tail, they're going to be somewhere between 3 and 5 inches, or 8 and 12 centimeters, with females being slightly larger than males. As we've discussed many times, that's very common. Very, very common, actually, because the females usually get larger to allow for more egg production. It is also a very flat salamander, as you can tell from this picture, and that flat is going to allow them to really squeeze into those crevices. That's what they use. It doesn't have a very round body that your fossorial species, your underground species. Something that is interesting to note, and we'll go to this picture to see it. If you can look right here, you'll see that they have very squared off toes. Most of your salamanders are going to have your kind of rounder toes, but these are actually very squared off. I imagine that is also because these are found in those crevices or found underneath decaying bark. because that's also something very important to note. The this genus, the Anides, I believe there's only Anides and another genus that is actually, they're arboreal salamanders, meaning that they actually love to climb trees. Most salamanders are not actually in a lot of trees. They'll be found in decaying logs on the ground, but usually they're not found in trees, whereas these are seen to be found in active living trees as long as they can get under bark and things like that. So that's very, very interesting. As you can tell from here, they have very large eyes. That helps because these are a nocturnal predator. So they use their sight to see during the night. They do have some diurnal activity during the day, but mainly it seems to be that they are active during the day. Something that you can kind of tell from these pictures, I couldn't find a good one, is they have a light blue to a yellow ventral surface, which that's their stomach. So that probably helps with some of their camouflage, allowing them to blend in a little more, but not so much. But you can see here as well, they got these squared off toes, yellow lichen back, large eyes, dark background, very, very unique salamander. Now, as far as reproduction goes, so it is kind of interesting. Most of the time your salamanders are going to find puddles or decaying logs with standing water in, whereas these do not seem to use any sort of water. What happens is the males will enter into breeding crevices and just wait on females. Man gets there and waits on a girl to come by. She goes in. I don't know if the breeding crevices are completely different than crevices they live in. It seems to be, but it was hard to find any sort of research on that. So after the reproductive courtship dance, and remember, salamanders are usually going to have a pretty intense courtship dance, mating ritual. Most salamanders have this. But after the dance, the female will actually lay eggs on the surface of the crevice. So basically think of it on the roof. They will, after the mateship is done, the female will climb onto the roof and start laying eggs. And what she'll do is she'll lay down a mucus layer, which acts as an adhesion stuff. So basically think like glue. She puts down some glue and then she lays an egg on that glue. And then she'll go to the next spot and then put down some more glue and lay another egg. And I believe it was like 30 to 50. I'm not entirely sure. Forgot about the number of eggs. But all I know is that after she has laid all the eggs, the female will usually wrap her body around the eggs after laying. So think of it, she's just kind of protection there. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the female will actually stay there for up to 3 months. And usually it is 3 months for those eggs to hatch. And another interesting part that we're going to have is that these do not have any larval stage. Many of your salamanders are going to have a larval stage that they metamorphose into adult, where these are a direct development salamander, meaning when the young hatch, they basically hatch out as small adults. So now we're going to get into the interesting fact about this salamander. As everyone knows, I like to end the video on your kind of an interesting fact for you to think about and what makes this animal relatively unique. And what I'm going to say about this is that the males are extremely territorial to other salamanders and would-be predators. And you'd think, well, they're territorial. There's many salamanders and lizards and snakes that have that are territorial. Apparently, not like this. Apparently, it is extremely hyper aggressive towards other salamanders and would-be predators. And such a high level of aggression is rare in salamander. So apparently, these things can get pretty darn mean, especially if you're an insect or another salamander. I mean, obviously, they're not going to deter a human that wants to get in there, but they will snap at you, apparently, and try and bite you, as opposed to just flat out running away. That high level of aggression is very, very rare in salamanders. Almost every other salamander will try and run and hide, but these apparently just don't do it. And what's even crazier is that the females get that hyper aggression when they're brooding over the eggs. So apparently when they're surrounding their eggs, when they've wrapped themselves around the eggs, the females actually get super hyper aggressive. You know, don't touch my eggs. Apparently you put a stick, a wire coat hanger, or, you know, just kind of poke at it. The female will actively snap at anything that's coming close to the eggs. Extreme hyper aggression. And then as soon as the eggs hatch, even though the young, I think from what I saw, the young stay in the little crevice for 2 months, after the young hatch, the female just kind of says, all right, I'm done. She apparently stops the hyper aggression and just let the young kind of do what they want, whatever happens. Because apparently there are reports that the same salamander that would aggressively attack a stick that was poked into the crevice while she was brooding over the eggs, you could literally go in and scoop out the babies and she would have very little reaction. So that's kind of an interesting aggression pattern, especially in salamanders. Salamanders, apparently the males are the salamander version of a chihuahua. The females are only a salamander version of a chihuahua when she's surrounding her eggs. All right, well, sorry that this one is relatively short, but thank you guys so much for stopping in. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you do, I'd really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again. Please give me an example, something that you'd like me to do one of these Herp Mondays or Fish Fridays. I would love to do some requests. But once again, thank you guys so much again. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones, and